About a month ago, I undertook a new make-your-own-gear project. I wanted to design the perfect tent for my wilderness hiking trips. My goal was to create a one-person tent that is just strong enough to handle high winds and moderate snow loads, is just large enough to fit myself and my gear comfortably when the tent is pitched all the way to the ground, is shaped as ergonomically and efficiently as possible, and of course has a design that is as simple, minimal, and light as possible while still meeting the other requirements. After spending more time than I'd like to admit researching tent designs, going through 2 rolls of house wrap, and about 4 headaches worth of math, this is what I came up with. It's an asymmetrical pyramid tent that I'm calling the Essentialist tent. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to build the Essentialist tent with dyneema composite fabric using the easy to follow pattern on my website. Materials. For this project, I used 7.5 yards of 1/2 ounce dyneema composite fabric, less than 1/2 yard of 2.92 ounce dyneema composite fabric hybrid, a 5-foot section of No. 3 waterproof zipper, 2 No. 3 double zipper pulls, 20 feet of 1.3 millimeter Z-line, 8 Lineloc V Line Adjusters, roughly 432 inches of single side 1-inch dyneema composite fabric seam tape, 3 yards of double-sided PSA tape for dyneema composite fabric, about 1 yard of 1/2-inch adhesive transfer tape, and less than 1 yard of 1/2-inch webbing. And to make my catenary curve tool, I used 2 large moving boxes, a can of spray paint, nylon twine, and duct tape. I definitely would not recommend using a No. 3 zipper. A No. 5 zipper would be much more reliable. I built my tent to be a 4-season tent for me, but I definitely would not recommend that you use 1/2 ounce DCF if you're looking to build a 4-season tent. 0.8 ounce or 1 ounce DCF would be a much better option. When you're picking materials, think about the worst conditions your tent could see, then determine what kind of weight to risk ratio you want in those conditions. You gotta think to yourself, what are the chances that X is gonna fail in Y conditions, and am I okay with that? If you're smart, you should be thinking to yourself, I wanna come close to eliminating all my risk, especially if I'm gonna be using this tent deep in the wilderness, so I'm gonna overbuild my tent and use materials that are more durable than I need them to be, even if it means I have to carry a couple extra ounces. Alright, now that all that's out of the way, we can finally start building the tent. Lay out as much of your 7.5 yards of fabric as you can in a large room. Now, to remove the selvage, mark out where the last horizontal dyneema fiber is on one side of the fabric. Parallel to those marks, measure and mark out another line 54 inches away. Use the folds in your fabric to help you keep your measuring tape on a right angle as you're doing this. Make sure those lines you drew are straight and solid and use them to cut out your selvage. Now it's time to mark out the corners of your panels on your fabric. Use the pattern layout to help you with this. Make sure you're as accurate as possible when doing this. A tape measure might work for you. In my case, I just had a 60-inch measuring tape, so before I actually marked out the panels, I marked out 60, 120, 180, 240, and then I made sure that my 240-inch mark was 30 inches away from the end of the fabric to add up to 270 inches or 7.5 yards. I then measured off those 60-inch marks to actually mark out the corners of the panels. Now use a straight edge to mark out this line on your fabric. Use the pattern layout to mark out all of your upper panels. Use a yardstick and the folds in the fabric to help you mark out the corners of the upper panels before you draw in the sides. Cut out those upper panels. Place your back and side upper panels on top of the lower panels with 1 inch of overlap. The uppers should either fit perfectly or be just slightly larger than the lowers. Carefully stick your 1-inch PSA tape right along the edge of your back and side upper panels. Slowly and carefully adhere your upper panels to your lower panels. As you're doing this, make sure the fabric on both sides of the tape is taut, make sure your fabric edges are aligned perfectly with the edges of the tape, and make sure the upper panels are perfectly aligned with the corner marks on your lower panels. Since this is pressure sensitive adhesive tape, press your seams down really hard with your finger or with a roller. Wait at least 3 days for your seams to cure before you put any serious tension on them. To continue further, we now need to build a catenary cut tool. If you want to copy what I did, get 2 large moving boxes, take them apart at the seam, carefully duct tape the straight edges of the seams and the flaps together, measure and mark out 81 inches on one side and 92 inches on the other side. Mark out the center of these measurements, and 3 inches below that, draw a line to mark the deepest point of the catenary curve. Tape a thin, flexible string to the very corner of your cardboard. Put a pin through your 81-inch or 92-inch mark. Wrap the string around the pin and pull the string until it's aligned with the 3-inch deep mark you made for the bottom of the catenary curve. Pin the loose end of the string to the cardboard and very carefully put a few pins through the middle of the string to hold it down to the cardboard. Gently and lightly spray paint the string. Keep the paint can at a right angle to the cardboard. Use an X-Acto or utility knife to cut along the silhouette that string created. Just in case you didn't make your cat cuts 100% symmetrical, write out top on one side of the cardboard and bottom on the other side. Use your new cat cut tool to mark out the edges of your panels. To do this, line the marks on the bottom of your cat cut tool up perfectly with the marks on the bottom sides of your panels. Turn the cat cut tool so that the mark on the top of your cat cut tool either lines up perfectly with the peak of the panel or lines up with the center line of the panel. After you've marked out those cat cuts, use a straight edge to mark out this line. Cut along that line and cut out your back and side panels. To start assembling your front panel, line up your two door panels and sew your waterproof zipper to them. To do this, fold the corners of your doors twice to start your bottom hem. Place the side of the zipper on top of the edge of one of the doors so that the teeth are facing inwards and the waterproof side of the zipper is facing down. Use a zipper foot to sew the zipper half to your fabric. Flip those zipper teeth over so they're facing outwards and sew another 2 lines of stitching down your zipper and fabric. Repeat with the other side. Make sure you leave some excess zipper at the bottom of your doors. Run your double-sided zipper pull down your zipper from the top of the doors. Mark and cut out a triangle on your DCF hybrid fabric that's the same size as your front upper panel. Cut out a 9-inch section of webbing, seal the ends, and sew it to the polyester side of your DCF hybrid panel with a box X stitch. Fold the bottom edge of your front upper panel over slightly, place it on top of your DCF hybrid panel, place this on top of your doors with a 1/2 inch of overlap, and tape everything together. Align a straight edge with the peak of your upper panel in the middle of your zipper to make sure everything is correctly lined up. Put 3 or 4 lines of stitching through your overlapped panels. Now, just like you did with the back and side panels, line the bottom corners up with the bottom mark on your cat cut tool. Line the top mark on your cat cut tool up with the exact center of the front panel. Mark out and cut out those cat cuts. Very carefully seal up the ends of the threads on your front panel seam. Start to sew your panels together, going from the bottom of the panels to the peaks of the panels. First, sew the side panels to the back panel, then sew on the front panel. Try to leave the least amount of seam allowance you can without compromising the strength of the sewn seam so that your seam tape will have a lot of material to stick to. Put some extra stitches through the seams at the peak, cut off any excess fabric at the peak, and carefully but liberally reinforce the seams at the peak with seam tape. To help protect your sewn seams while you continue to work, put a strip of seam tape down each of your sewn seams starting from the top of the tent. Leave the bottom corners of the tent untaped for now though. As you're applying the seam tape, gently pull apart the fabric on both sides of the seam. Just like you did with the double-sided tape, press the single-sided tape down really hard and wait a couple days for the adhesive to fully cure. Find a bowl or cup that you could use to trace your circular patches on your DCF hybrid fabric. This glass has a 4-inch diameter, which is the minimum that you'd want. The wider your patches are, the stronger your tent will be. I used 4 of these patches for my tent. To reinforce your peak, take one of your patches, fold it into a cone that's just slightly wider than the peak of your tent, tape it so that it holds its shape, cover the cone in double-sided DCF tape, and gently stick the cone inside of the peak. Now, sew a slim rolled hem around the bottom of your tent. Cut your patches so that they fit the corners of your tent and sew along the edges of these cut patches. Cut out small sections of webbing, seal the ends of them, put them through your line locks, and sew them to your patches with a box X stitch. Finish taping your seams and place DCF tape over your sewn on patches. At this point, you now have a functional tent. My tent at this point weighs 7.7 ounces. It weighs 11 ounces when I add in the lines, 6 carbon fiber stakes, a stake sack, and a polycryo ground sheet. Some additional features you may want to add at this point are extra guy out points, a bug mesh floor or skirt, bathtub floor, or toggles to hold the doors back.